Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Representatives from North Carolina's New Hanover County Sheriff's Office say that a man is facing numerous charges this week after he allegedly drove onto the grounds of a local airport and ended up crashing into the terminal while being chased by authorities. The incident began just after 7 p.m. on March 9th when the suspect, later identified as Trey Anthony Dvorak, drove his white hatchback to the Wilmington International Airport. Upon arriving, Dvorak reportedly busted through a perimeter fence before driving into the airfield and onto the tarmac. When authorities noticed what was happening and caught up with Dvorak, a chase began. The brief pursuit came to an end when the man allegedly crashed into the airport's terminal, sending his vehicle plowing through the glass doors and windows and onto the tiled floor. A TSA agent reportedly broke her ankle as she was forced to run away from the vehicle. According to police, Dvorak was arrested immediately following the crash after being taken out of the totaled hatchback. It's not clear what his motives were, though reports state that he was not intoxicated. Others suggest that there may have been some sort of mental health issue at play, with one representative from the New Hanover County Sheriff's Office stating during an interview that Dvorak had told them that, quote, "the devil made him do it." At the time of this recording, Dvorak is facing a number of charges, including assault with a deadly weapon on a government official, speeding to elude arrest, trespass on airport property, disorderly conduct, and resist, obstruct, delay a government official. Authorities in Kalamazoo County, Michigan released disturbing new information in the case of a missing local woman this week, confirming that they had found her blood inside of her charred vehicle. The case began on the night of December 10th, 2022, when mother of 8, 35-year-old Heather Mae Kelly left her home in the city of Portage at around 9 p.m. She called her children about an hour and 20 minutes later to say that she would be back soon. However, she never arrived. The next day, Heather's cousin discovered her pickup truck burnt out and abandoned at North Sprinkle Road and East Michigan Avenue in Comstock Township. The cousin told investigators that she saw a red pickup truck speed off from the scene as she was arriving. Roughly 16 hours earlier, a deputy with the Kalamazoo Sheriff's Office had seen Heather's truck in the same location where it was later discovered. This was before the 35-year-old had been reported missing and before the vehicle had been set on fire. The deputy reportedly tagged the vehicle as abandoned and left it where it was. We now know that hair and blood recovered from the burned vehicle were found to be a DNA match to Heather, and that items of clothing belonging to her were also discovered nearby. While the 35-year-old is still officially missing at the time of this recording, authorities say that they now suspect she may have been the victim of a homicide. As for who might be responsible for the chilling crime, authorities have stated Heather's boyfriend is a person of interest. The man, who has not been identified by name, has not been charged, though is in custody on a federal hold until April 26th. According to reports, at the time Heather went missing, her boyfriend was on parole and living at a halfway house in Kalamazoo Township while finishing a sentence for a 2010 drug conspiracy case that included a murder-for-hire plot. This halfway house is located just a couple of miles from where Heather's burned pickup truck was found. When police questioned the boyfriend about Heather's disappearance, he claimed that he had last seen her on December 10th when she dropped him off at the halfway house. However, both his cell phone records and a GPS monitor he was wearing as part of his parole proved this was not the case. They had been at a private dinner club in Kalamazoo later that night. The man's cell phone was also later tracked to the area near where Heather's truck was found. Additionally, on the day that the truck was discovered, the boyfriend allegedly cut off his monitor and fled the halfway house. He was arrested 3 days later and claimed that he took off because Heather's family members had been threatening him. The family denies this. At the current time, authorities are still investigating Heather's disappearance and are asking anyone who might have information about the case to come forward. Anyone with such information is encouraged to reach out to either the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office or the Portage Police. Authorities in Henry County, Georgia say that a local business owner and beloved community member is dead this week after she was allegedly kidnapped and murdered by a former boyfriend/employee. According to reports, the incident began at around 2:50 a.m. on March 5th, when police in the city of Locust Grove were called to the home of 42-year-old mother of two, Erica Atkins. When officers arrived, they were told that Erica was missing, and they began to uncover a series of disturbing clues at the scene. Almost immediately, a 38-year-old man named Romero Johnson was identified as a person of interest in the case. Johnson had formerly had a romantic relationship with Erica and was employed at her local bookstore business. Authorities were able to locate Johnson a few hours later, at which time he was taken in for questioning. When interviewed, Johnson allegedly told police that he had been at Erica's house the previous evening, but that she was fine when he left and that he had gone straight home afterwards. However, thanks to evidence at the scene, investigators knew this could not be the case. Surveillance video showed that Johnson had been driving around until after 3:20 a.m. that morning. Chillingly, he had also been caught by a neighbor's camera across the street from Erica's house, dragging something large that had been covered in a tarp from the garage into the back of his vehicle. Police suspected it was Erica's body. Blood and an earring that belonged to the missing woman had been found on the driveway, and an examination of Johnson's vehicle allegedly later revealed the presence of blood. The vehicle looked as if it had been recently cleaned. Sadly, at around 1:15 p.m. on March 6th, everyone's worst fears were confirmed when Erica's body was found in a creek by a fisherman in Putnam County. Johnson was charged with her kidnapping and murder. News of Erica's death came as a major blow to friends and family, but also to many members of her local community. The 42-year-old had not only recently won a Small Business of the Year award for her bookstore, Birdsong Books, but was also known for donating books and volunteering her time to local organizations. At the time of this recording, no motive has been released behind the murder, though it has been suggested that Johnson might have been bitter about he and Erica's romantic relationship. Those close to Erica said that she had been the one that ended things. Currently, Johnson remains in custody. Authorities in Redmond, Washington say that 3 people are dead this week, including the alleged attacker, after a man broke into the home of an internet personality that he had been stalking and shot her and her husband before turning his weapon on himself. According to reports, the incident began at around 1:45 a.m. on March 10th, when police received a frantic 911 call to a residence on the 16,700 block of Northeast 89th Street. The caller stated that she had been visiting her daughter's house when an unknown man had broken in and attacked her, her daughter, and her daughter's husband. When officers arrived at the scene, they found the husband, later identified as 34-year-old Mohammed Nasseri, lying in the doorway of his upscale property. He was suffering from a gunshot wound to the chest, and though emergency responders pulled him outside and performed CPR, sadly, they were unable to save his life. The horrifying discoveries continued when police searched the rest of the property. In an upstairs bedroom, they found the second homeowner, Mohammed's wife, 33-year-old Zora Sadeghi, also dead from gunshot wounds, as well as their suspected shooter, 38-year-old Ramin Kodakaram Razai. His fatal gunshot wound was allegedly self-inflicted. Authorities now say that the chilling crime was the culmination of a terrifying months-long stalking campaign conducted by Ramin, who was allegedly obsessed with Zora. The 38-year-old, who was said to be a long-haul trucker from Texas, had reportedly come across Zora when he tuned in to one of her podcasts. He reached out to her over social media, and the two exchanged messages. However, according to reports, the nature and frequency of those messages soon began to change, to the point where Zora started to become concerned. At one point, Ramin allegedly messaged her more than 100 times in a single day and began to send unsolicited gifts. When his attempts to contact Zora went unanswered, he reportedly began to call her and even showed up at her home with flowers, despite the 33-year-old never providing him with either of these contact details. Beginning in December of last year, Zora and her husband went to police to report what was happening and voice their concerns. However, it apparently wasn't until recently that a restraining order was finally granted. And even then, the document was not served because authorities in Texas were unable to locate Ramin. It's believed that on the morning of the shooting, the 38-year-old broke into Zora and Muhammad's home through a window and began the fatal attack. It appears that Zora's mother was the first to encounter the attacker, though he did not fire at her, allowing her to flee the house and call 911. At the time of this recording, the situation is still under investigation. Authorities in Carroll County, Virginia announced this week that a 35-year-old woman is facing charges after a recent bizarre incident in which she allegedly tried to break into a man's house while naked and attacked him with a frying pan. The whole situation unfolded sometime on the night of February 26th, when the unidentified victim heard a strange sound coming from the rear of his home on Loafers Rest Road in the community of Austinville. When the man went to investigate, he found a woman who he did not know, later identified as 35-year-old Paula Michelle Locklear, who was allegedly breaking in through the back door into his kitchen. Strangely, Locklear didn't have any clothes on, but she did have a frying pan. When the homeowner confronted the 35-year-old, she allegedly attacked. According to reports, the victim was hit in the head and hand with the frying pan, though was eventually able to push Locklear back outside and secure the door. That's when she apparently began to switch off the electrical breakers running to the home and beating on the kitchen window. At the same time, she was allegedly screaming at the homeowner to, quote, get out of her house, or she was going to kill him. The homeowner reportedly responded by shooting Locklear in the lower leg. When authorities arrived at the scene, Locklear was taken for treatment at a local hospital. She was then arrested and transported to the Carroll County Jail on charges of felony breaking and entering of an occupied home while armed with a deadly weapon to commit larceny, assault and battery, and intentional damage to property. The homeowner was not charged with anything after it was determined he was acting in self-defense. Representatives from Texas's Fort Worth police say that they are looking for a pair of unknown suspects this week after they recently committed so-called prank robberies at two local stores. According to reports, the incidents both took place on the afternoon of February 25th. The first began at around 3:40 p.m. when the two men walked into a Family Dollar store on the 7300 block of South Hewlin Street. Video surveillance showed how the first suspect walked inside holding what appeared to be part of a handheld steam cleaner, while the second man followed behind, filming with a camera. The first man reportedly held up the item in his hand, pointed it at one of the store's cashiers as if it were a gun, and then yelled at everyone inside, quote, get down, this is a stick-up. The men could then be seen laughing and motioning towards someone out of frame, presumably explaining to them that it was just a prank. I mean, hilarious. Am I right? Apparently these guys thought so, because according to police after leaving the scene, they immediately went to a second Family Dollar store to do the whole thing over again. Unfortunately for the two men, not everyone thought the whole thing was as funny as they did. It's almost like people don't enjoy feeling like they're being violently robbed at gunpoint, even if you tell them it's a joke afterwards. I mean, go figure. Fort Worth police were also quick to clarify that the "it's just a prank, bro" defense isn't actually a bona fide legal protection. A post to their Twitter account about the matter helpfully points out, quote, a prank robbery is still a robbery. At the time of this recording, authorities are requesting the public's help in identifying the two unknown suspects. Anyone with information about the case is being asked to contact the Fort Worth Police Department's Robbery Division. Authorities in Columbus, Ohio released a tragic update in the case of a missing 40-year-old woman this week, announcing that her remains had been recovered and her boyfriend had been officially charged with her murder. According to reports, the case began on January 31st of this year when Columbus police were notified by their law enforcement counterparts in Cleveland about a possible homicide that had occurred within their city limits. The victim was believed to be a 40-year-old woman named Renee Benedetti. When Columbus police began investigating, they learned that Renee had not been seen since January 26th. A search of the Northside apartment where she lived with her boyfriend, 46-year-old Gene Scott Jr., turned up no sign of the couple, but 2 firearms were recovered at the scene. On February 2nd, Scott was arrested in Kentucky after he was found to be illegally in possession of another gun. The 46-year-old was prohibited from owning firearms due to convictions for felonious assault and aggravated robbery stemming from a 1997 incident in which Scott inflicted serious injuries on a male victim that left him in a coma for more than 3 weeks. On February 20th, investigators received new information concerning Renee's whereabouts. This resulted in a roughly 2.5-week search effort that sadly ended on March 8th, with the discovery of the 40-year-old's remains in a landfill in Brown County. According to police, Scott has now confessed to Renee's murder. During questioning, he allegedly admitted that they had been involved in a heated argument on January 29th, during which he had strangled Renee to death. Following the murder, Scott reportedly wrapped up her body in a rug before disposing of it. At the time of this recording, few additional details have been provided about the case. Scott is now facing murder charges in addition to the earlier firearms charges, and is currently being held without bond. Authorities in Summit County, Ohio say that a 58-year-old man has been arrested and is facing charges this week after he was allegedly responsible for the chilling murders of at least 3 people who were found dead in 2 different locations. The incident began at around 8:30 a.m. on March 10th when a motorist called police in Akron to report a disturbing discovery. The bodies of 2 men were visible on Cordova Avenue in a narrow wooded strip that runs between the street and a sound barrier blocking the adjacent interstate. Roughly 20 minutes later, police about 2 miles away in Copley Township received a nearly identical call. Another man's body had been dumped off of Wright Road. Investigators would soon discover that all 3 victims had been bound, gagged, and shot in the head. Within a few hours of these gruesome finds, authorities were able to zero in on a suspect, a 58-year-old man named Elias Gudino. According to reports, Gudino is a convicted felon who was sentenced to 150 months in prison in 2010 after federal authorities busted a national cocaine trafficking ring that he led from Akron. He was released from prison in 2017, but reports state that he was on probation until the middle of last year. While few additional details are available at the time of this recording, including the alleged motive behind the crime, it's reasonable to speculate that the situation was drug-related given the 58-year-old's criminal history. Reports also mention that police suspect that all of the unidentified victims were kidnapped and specifically brought into Summit County. As for how police were able to link Gudino to this week's crimes, this has not been released, though there are reports that there was a 4th intended victim of the killings who managed to escape. This victim was also bound and gagged, though no other information has been provided about how they were able to get away. At the time of this recording, Gudino remains in custody and has been charged with 1 count of aggravated murder and 1 count of attempted aggravated murder. Authorities say that more charges are expected to follow, and that they are still investigating whether additional suspects were involved. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a minute to thank our amazing supporters over on Patreon. As many of you are aware, our situation on YouTube always seems to be a bit uncertain, but our patrons help to ensure that we can continue to make content like this long term without having to worry as much about what surprises might be thrown our way. Plus, patrons also get access to 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. If you'd like to help support the channel directly, head over to patreon.com/crimezone to join. You can also find that link in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and take care.